This is another example of a function which you're not familiar with and having to draw the gradient graph of this function. Alright, so you don't need to know what the function is, it's just a case of going through the graph and understanding. We'll see when we do the animation, we'll get a negative gradient which is constant, so that's going to appear below the axis. You'll then have a negative gradient turning into 0 here, and then a positive gradient, and then this part here is going to be 0. The important thing to understand with this function is this is another example of a function which is not smooth in certain places. So remember, a function has to be smooth and continuous for a gradient to be defined. So at any points where it's not smooth or continuous, then the gradient will be undefined at that point. So if we look at this function, the function is a continuous function, therefore that will be fine, the gradient will be defined in that criteria. However, if you look at x equals -2 and at x equals 1, you don't have a smooth change in the gradient. So the gradient here is going, say, -1, however, and then all of a sudden it's jumping down to -5, -4, something like that. So that's not a smooth transition in the gradient. Therefore, at x equals -2, when you draw your gradient graph, you have to represent that the gradient's undefined by putting open circles. So we'll have an open circle, say at -1, and then when it jumps down to -4, say, it will be down here. And we also look at when x equals 1, you get a positive gradient here, and then all of a sudden, after 1, it turns into a gradient of 0. Not a smooth transition. So a smooth transition would be the gradient would be going, it would be a nice curve. If it's going to 0, it'd be going 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, 0, and then 0.1. That's a smooth transition in the gradient. This is a sudden change in the gradient. Therefore, it's not smooth at this point at x equals 1. Therefore, again, you'll have open circles there. I'll just insert this line here, which is the equation of the tangent. Okay, so then we'll just run it and see what the gradient function looks like here. So you see the gradient in this section here is going to be -1, therefore it's a horizontal line below the axis at -1. You'll then have an open circle here, you see at -2, because the gradient was jumping from -1 to -4 without any smooth transition. Again, at x equals 1 here, you've got a gradient going from 2 to 0 without any transition. Therefore, that's not smooth. Okay, that part of the function is not smooth. Therefore, the gradient will be undefined. And we have to use open circles again there. So here you'll have an open circle at this point here, an open circle here, an open circle here, an open circle here. Okay, and then this red line will be your gradient function for this.